Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your webinar on aquaculture gas to markets. My name is Elekwachi, and I'm the Market Systems Development Project Manager for PIN Foundation. I'll be presenting alongside my colleague, Soya, who is the Market Development Advisor for PIN Foundation. Faith, would you like to say hi?
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, we're very excited to be on this platform to tell our story. Our story about the relevance of this title, that's Aquaculture Goes to Market. The whole essence is to show the link between markets and how effective market systems can result to increased income and jobs for men and women, young and old. Before we carry on, I'm going to talk a bit about PIN Foundation. PIN is an acronym for Foundation for Partnership Initiatives in the Niger Delta. It is actually located in Delta State, which is one of the 9 Niger Delta states. The main funder is Chevron Corporation, and it funds PIN through a window called the Niger Delta Partnership Initiatives, which is based in Washington, D.C. Our support implementer is DAI. The program was launched in 2010. It has 2 phases. The first phase started in 2010 up to 2015. The program is now in phase 2, which is from 2015 to 2020. We're currently preparing for the 3rd cycle of funding. PIN has adopted a making markets work for the poor approach, focusing mainly on economic growth, but it also has some heavy components around peace building, capacity building, advocacy analysis for enabling environment, creating an enabling environment for sustainable economic growth. The picture you're seeing is that of Warri, Nigeria. That's basically where PIN Foundation is based. And at the background there, you're going to see the petroleum refinery. The Niger Delta covers about 9 oil revenue generating states in Nigeria with a population of 31 million. With the presence of oil companies and large expenditure, the Niger Delta has a strong purchasing power compared to the other parts of Nigeria. The region actually is coming out of about 10 years of civil war, and there has been a lot of distrust. It is an environment where individuals tend to wait for assistance from the oil company, from the government, and people having a very strong entitlement mentality. And some of the associations are actually weak because they actually formed to get some money from the government or from the donors. Traditionally, the Niger Delta are kind of fish farmers because it has a lot of riverine communities. So just to give you the background of the intervention, PIN conducted an assessment and an extensive survey to do some analytical work to build a base of evidence to form its activities. It looked at the role of gender, youth employment, sources of conflict, and the rest. And eventually, we discovered that the aquaculture sector stood out with a very strong potential. And we also discovered that there's a huge demand for fish, which is driven by growth. And most of the major feed companies in Nigeria have been very cautious about the Niger Delta, and we're not really interested in investing in it. And so what did PIN do? We looked at all the opportunities and the underlying constraints. We discovered that it's a massive opportunity because the market is about 3.2 million metric tons. Half of that is made by import. So demand is 6, supply. The key constraint became that local farmers cannot meet local demands for a number of reasons. One, there is a low feed conversion ratio due to high mortality. There's also a slow growth and low wasteful use of improved feed. All these things impact on productivity and profitability of small farmers. In order to address the constraints, we needed to improve the knowledge stock, especially with regards to feeding and business practices. It was also very important to improve the supply of appropriate input by hatcheries, feed companies, and local consultants. So we decided to do a pilot intervention with PIND being in the center of it. So a demonstration pond intervention was designed to showcase best agronomic practices in catfish farming. And so we brought in a number of market actors. The feed companies sponsored 2/3 of the cost of the feed. Originally, they didn't know how to organize demonstrations, and it took some convincing to get them on board. The hatchery supplied the post-fingerlings, and the association coordinated its members. The Association of Demo Farmers provided and managed the stock, which includes the stocking, feeding, harvesting of the demonstration ponds. Initially, the association expected this to be given away to them, so it needed months of conviction to get them in. So PIN provided technical specialists, and as well as the feed companies were responsible for overall supervision of intervention and developed technical competence. So PIN also helped with the help of the technical consultant to come up with aquaculture best practices manual. So following a 6-month pilot intervention, the harvesting of the pond showed increase in yield and profitability. Average profit increased 5% to 10%. This was mainly due to reduction in the cost of production through new knowledge in feeding regime and drop in fish mortality. The feed company saw an increase in the sales and customer base. Good. So this is the picture seen is actually that of the United Ufoma Fish Farmers Association in Warri, Nigeria. This is the biggest fish farming cluster in Nigeria. And you can see that it has about 4,900 ponds and over 1,000 farmers actually doing one form of business or the other. And you can see a very closer shot of one of the ponds. You can see a young guy feeding his fish. And now the scale up. How do we scale it up? We took the results on a roadshow to other feed companies to see how effective demonstration can actually lead to increased customer base. Since the pilot, the demo model has scaled up to 5 feed companies who are now running demos and paying all costs. The trained local service providers and government extension agents are organizing demonstrations. Additional feed companies are crowding in beyond the project support, and more fish farmers are copying by demanding feed companies to organize demos as a condition for accessing farmers. So this is a very good example of how a very good assessment plus a nice pilot can actually lead to large crowding in, copying, and wider systemic change. So the feed companies took the center stage, and essentially the lead farmers participating. So this kind of caused a ripple effect in the entire system, because we now started seeing the emergence of other actors. The smoking king manufacturers came into the space because the fish farmers needed to increase the shelf life of the fish. We also have financial institutions who began to lend to the sector. We had fishery extension agents who got in touch. Our sister project, the DFID made, came into the space at the time and actually took on and decided to work with us to scale this up. So the picture there is that of the feed company, a fish feed dealer. Now, the final phase of the scale-up saw the emergence of the aquaculture service providers. Because we felt that to achieve further scale and crowding, we needed to do excursion visits to fish farms from other clusters and other feed companies. So the result of the pilot and its value proposition were shared among market feed companies and the core markets and the other actors. The feed companies are using the demo model as a marketing tool. And more companies are crowding in. Different demonstration models are emerging. In one of the situations, a few companies are adapting the model into a fishery academy to train existing new fish farmers. To date, over 7,000 fish farmers have been trained directly, and much more of them are copying, and we're going to see that in the results we'll be announcing. So just to show you a picture illustration of how the value chain actually functions. So you can see there is the hatchery on the left side with some fingerlings. And you can see a fish pond owner, a female fish pond owner feeding her fish. And then you see youth farmers harvesting a fish pond. And this is very rudimentary way of doing it. But you know, one interesting thing is that they are all youths, very young people doing this, who are providing labor, who own the ponds. And you also see a catfish being prepared for weighting. And then they're using the weighing scale to do it. Because without this, you won't be able to prepare for the sales. Catfish farming selling in the open market. You can see the women selling the fish in a bowl with some little water to preserve the life of the fish. So when you produce the fish to table size, you can sell as fresh fish, or you can smoke or process it. The traditional drums for drying the fish is the very local, rudimentary way of processing it, and that's what you see on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side is the choco oven, which is a slightly improved technology. The difference between the two is that the local drums has a very low capacity. It also consumes a lot of oil. It produces smoke directly to the fish, and so the drying efficiency is very low. On the other side, the choco oven is energy efficient, consumes less oil, preserves heat, and dries the fish quicker and has higher capacity. And then this is a closer shot of fish dried from the choco oven. And there's a much more improved version, which is the smoking king for drying fish. This is a lot more efficient, bigger capacity, dries quickly, and reduces the amount of smoke in the fish. And so this is a leisure time, young people sitting together, eating fish directly from processed through the choco oven or other kind of smoking. So at this juncture, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Faith to talk specifically on the results in terms of job creation and outreach. Over to you, Faith.
Thank you very much, James. So now after the pilot intervention, what has happened? You see that from the UUFFA location where the intervention was piloted, the number of farmers has increased significantly, to over 935 farmers. And this increased from about 800 farmers in that cluster. The number of ponds is now about 3,900 ponds. Now, beyond the pilot location, the pilot cluster, there is a new layout cluster that has now emerged as a result of expansion. That cluster has over 890 ponds and 255 farmers. The reason for this expansion and increase is as a result of more farmers coming into the sector due to increased profitability and the fact that the aquaculture business has been demonstrated as being viable and profitable. Now, beyond the pilot cluster, within the Warri and its environs, there are now a number of clusters that are springing up in different locations, and these clusters are also growing and expanding. We have the Crusaders fish cluster with over 206 ponds and 92 farmers. We have the Ifie with 60 ponds and 50 farmers. We have Camp 74 with 8,500 ponds, 300 farmers. There is a Jedo cluster. There is also the Egbokodo cluster with about 600 ponds and 250 farmers. Now, these are just some of the clusters within the Warri and its environs in Delta State alone. Across the Niger Delta region in the country, there is a wider systemic change that is taking place with different fish farm clusters emerging and growing. Now, what has all these systemic changes led to? Like James has rightly pointed out, we have the ASPs, we now have the feed companies who are beginning to demonstrate these practices to farmers and showing them that it's viable. Cumulatively, the ASPs and feed companies have reached over 7,155 farmers across the Niger Delta region. Now, this has also translated into jobs of 2,705 full-time equivalent jobs. Now, these jobs is coming from youth, it's coming from women, it's coming from the production aspect, from hatcheries, as James has talked about. Then we also have jobs coming from the fish smoking aspect, using the Shoko oven and using the smoking cane as well. We also have ASPs creating jobs on their own, who have also enlisted other ASPs, mentoring them, and they're also beginning to provide services across the Niger Delta region. We are going to talk very briefly, looking at the results chain and some of the results that has accumulated so far from the beginning of this project. So I'm going to turn it over to James to talk about the result chain.
Exactly. This is just the result chain for this particular intervention. For the result chain, essentially, we're trying to look at how the activities actually cause some changes in the support market and also at the core market level. Just picking out a few activities that we did. On the left-hand side, you're going to see that we provided free technical training and training of trainers for 45 aquaculture service providers. The reason is very simple, because this is the exit strategy for this intervention. We needed to have service providers to really take on the intervention in terms of meeting the needs of some farmers for knowledge and agronomic practices, and also try to reach out to feed companies as intermediaries. And on the right-hand side, you're going to see 4 demonstrations established by members of the association. In terms of changes at the support market, in terms of increasing knowledge, attitudes, and practices, 15 of the 45 ASPs are beginning to see the importance of delivering training services. This was as of June this year. 7 feed companies, a total of 7 feed companies to date, have adopted the demo plot model for running their demos. So you're going to see, in terms of performance of the support service provider, a combination of 7 feed companies and 15 aquaculture service providers are reaching over 7,000 farmers. Okay? Then, of this number, we're noticing that over 4,700 farmers are adopting best practices and experiencing increased income. This is close to 60% change of the population reach. And a 30% increase in yield experienced by farmers from just 5%. And this is leading to increase in jobs. So far, we've located about 2,700 jobs created by the farmers and the ASPs. And this has translated to about 1 million pounds in increased income for farmers. So this is how all these things add up. The entire systemic change that has been created while the support markets are reaching the core market and then leading to overall increase in income and jobs for the poor. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we'll begin to entertain your questions now.
Yeah, well, thank you, James, and thank you very much, Faith, as well. That was very interesting. We've had quite a lot of questions coming in, I'm glad to say. So while I just look through them and we get a sense of where to start, why don't I just start with a fairly simple one. So, James, can you just explain a little bit about the practicalities here? How is land procured for the fish ponds, and are the farmers expected to have land available themselves, or is there some sort of collective group effort to procure land for the new fish ponds?
There are quite a number of different models. The land belongs to the government and also to individuals. But in some situations, there are, for example, in the picture that we showed, that's the biggest fish farming cluster in Nigeria. The land belongs to the government, but individuals and farmers can actually rent it. They can rent the ponds and pay annually, and sometimes for over 2 years. But that's for ponds. There are also other fish farmers, essentially, who can do the concrete tanks and the tarpaulins. So that's the situation.
Okay. Thank you. A few more practical questions. What are the 3 most critical constraints for starting up as a fish farmer or starting a fish pond?
Yeah, the first 4 has to do with suitable environment. The environment has to be suitable because most fish farmers in Nigeria actually focus more on the catfish. Secondly, there has to be adequate knowledge. Knowledge of good agronomy practices. Quite a number of technologies. Feeding by biomass. You need to know the quantity of feed to give so that you will be efficient and profitable. Then the quality of fish seed. So these are 3 critical components to really, that actually constrain beginners.
Okay. I have a question, a sort of project question now, and perhaps Faith might be the best person to answer this. But can you put the achievements of the project into some context? So when we talk about a 5 or 10% increase in the profitability of a fish pond, what does that translate to in terms of impact on livelihoods? I mean, how much extra income does that mean for the person involved? How is that extra income likely to change their lives?
Okay, so thank you very much. Yeah, in terms of the income for fish farmers, now we could categorize these fish farmers into micro, small, and medium. So because of the best practices and the dynamics in the system, you see farmers who are doing 2 cycles of fish production in a year. Some can even extend up to 3 cycles in 1 year. So as a result, the profitability, looking at the 10% increase from what they were doing initially, amounts to about $550 for a small fish farm, a micro farmer who is doing between 200 to 1,000 fish, per annum. While for the medium-sized and small-scale fish farmer doing between 1,100 to 5,000 fishes per annum, you have roughly about $2,750 profit per annum. And then for those doing 5,000 to 10,000 fishes, it goes as high as about $5,500 per farmer in a year. That's a percentage increase in profit.
Okay. And what kind of income would a youth working on a fish pond be likely to be earning from that activity if it was one individual, and perhaps the pond is not, they don't own it, or maybe they're working for a group?
So the income, so like I mentioned, the income that a small farmer who is doing up to 1,000 fish can make is about $550. And this per annum, and it can actually plow back up to 50% of this into the business, and of course be able to take care of his, personal needs.
Okay. And but so $500 a year, that doesn't sound like a full livelihood. So this is a part-time job that people do on the side alongside other activities.
So like I did mention, is in different scale. So that is for those practicing at a micro level. So for those practicing, on a small scale level for business, commercial farmers, but on a small scale, they can make as high as $2,750.
Okay. Great. Well, look, I'm just looking through some of the other questions. While I do that, can I just draw everybody's attention, please, to a little web link that Isabel's just posted in the chat box. It's our web link. It's our webinar survey link, and it gives you a chance to just give us, in a few seconds, give us a bit of feedback on the webinar and what you liked about it, what you didn't like, and any comments you'd like to make. Please do check out that link. It's just gone into the chat box. So there's a question just come in from Ilewole Olutosin, excuse my pronunciation, Ilewole. But it's quite an interesting question because it's about, if you like, the overall business model that PIND is promoting. The question is, can you explain the incentives for the aquaculture service providers to continue delivering this model? So in other words, how does this model become sustainable?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite straightforward because, I mean, it's about the business model. The question is, are the aquaculture service providers really making money by going into this sector? The answer is yes, because originally the feed companies tried to drive the demo themselves, and then they discovered that they won't have the time and the expertise to do this. And so the aquaculture service providers actually came on board, especially some of those that are actually very entrepreneurial. They're making a lot of money. And we're beginning to see the emergence of master aquaculture service providers who are making money, delivering services to farmers, providing advice to farmers. In the Niger Delta, we have top 4 aquaculture service providers. Okay, they're making money and they're delivering services to farmers. Some of them have over 1,000 farmers under them in their network as their customers. And they're providing on-site service delivery to all of them at a fee.
That's very interesting. So perhaps you could give us a bit of a sort of description of what a typical agriculture service provider is like. Is it someone who started out as a fish farmer themselves and they're now branching out, diversifying? What kind of status would they likely have within the community? And also, perhaps a really interesting question in my mind is what kind of prevented them from taking off before? I mean, what was the systemic problem that was preventing the emergence of these kind of agriculture service providers before PIND became involved?
Thank you. That's a very interesting question. What we noticed is that when we actually invited people to sign up as aquaculture service providers, we then noticed a lot of young people, fresh graduates coming into the space. And one of the best aquaculture service providers is actually a young man who just graduated and actually got into fish farming. And when he saw an opportunity to start advising other fish farmers, he then took it up as a business. And we kind of put out a value proposition to quite a number of them to sign up as aquaculture service providers. They started getting into the space. There was initially no structure at all, So they saw this as a massive opportunity because really, so many fish farmers were losing money, They were not profitable. They were not, very efficient. And so when the aquaculture service providers saw this opportunity and started filling the gap, there was an automatic absorption of the service providers into the system. But not all of them have performed at the same level. The most successful ones are very entrepreneurial and quite young. And they are actually going beyond their region to service other farmers. And interestingly, some of them are beginning to absorb the other aquaculture service providers to work under their organization. So there's kind of expansion of the aquaculture service providers.
And if I could add to what James has talked about, looking at the sustainability model. Now, these ASPs, that the aquaculture service providers, have gone beyond just training on fish farming. They are beginning to provide various suites of services to farmers across the region. Now, this includes access to finance, which is a very difficult, a very major problem here in Nigeria. So they are beginning to provide that service to farmers as a fee. They also provide access to markets, linking farmers to different market channels where they can sell their fish. And then also they do a lot of linkages to inputs, where farmers can get quality inputs. So all these services are being provided by the service providers as a fee. So this forms part of the incentive for the aquaculture service providers to continue in the business. And if you look at the income structure of what these ASPs make, they make up to $5,000 to $10,000 per annum from these activities put together from all the different farmers within their network across the Niger Delta region.
Okay, excellent. That's really interesting. I've got the questions are coming in thick and fast now. There's one quick sort of question about the value chain. What's the you haven't talked much about the marketing of the fish, the end marketing. Is that a challenge to overcome, and if so, what was done?
Okay.
Yeah. Initially, we talked about the entire market size. We said it's quite a big market, about 4 million metric tons, and half of that actually is made by import. So there are quite a number of different channels. Okay, there is the fresh fish channel, where basically people eat produce directly from the farm gate, and there is also the smoked fish channel. The smoked fish channel is essentially from the farm gate you have processors who buy fresh fish and basically process them and then sell in the open market. Okay, so the market is not really a big problem at the moment, because there is a huge demand both for fresh fish and the dried fish.
Okay. Some technical questions now, and this is probably going to be your party, Faith. These are coming from Nafis Muntasir, who works for Mastercard Foundation. By the way, Mastercard Foundation are now one of the key supporters of the Beam Exchange, so I'm very pleased to have Nafis asking some questions. And he would like to know a bit about the methodology for counting direct and indirect jobs created. Can you explain a little bit about your methodology for counting jobs, Faith?
Okay, thank you very much. Like I did mention earlier, jobs is being counted using full-time equivalent, so which means it is not necessarily the number of people, but the hours that they have worked. And our full-time equivalents mean people who have worked for 8 hours in a day, 5 days in a week. That's 240 days in a year. Now, what we do is, because if you look at the model, we walk through the ASPs, which are the support markets, to reach different farmers. So when we do the assessment, we look at the full-time equivalent generated from the farming activities, from the activities of these farmers, and also from the activities of the aquaculture service providers. Then we go beyond that to look at, yes, after the sources of these farmers, who else is copying these farmers in their different locations. Then we estimate the indirect jobs, because we also have to assess the copiers of the direct beneficiaries. So we go beyond just direct beneficiaries to really get to talk to the indirect beneficiaries and then assess the FTEs generated from the indirect beneficiaries as well.
Excellent. Okay, so how many, can you give us a rough idea of how many individuals in total are likely to have benefited in some way from those, out of that total number of jobs created then?
So you mean the direct beneficiaries?
Well, I mean, I think you said, maybe you can,
Okay.
can you just go back to that slide with the numbers on it? Yes, so where it said 2,700 full-time equivalent jobs, how many individuals in total are likely to have benefited from that? 7.5, is that 7,155?
So from the 7,155 farmers, we have over 4,765 farmers who are experiencing some economic benefits, increasing their incomes across the Niger Delta region. And these numbers put together, contribute to the 2,705 jobs recorded.
Okay. And so Yapasa, somebody from the Yapasa program is asking what a full-time equivalent job in aquaculture looks like. So how many ponds would a farmer need to work to do full-time equivalent job? I mean, I suppose in other words, how many full-time equivalent jobs are associated with each pond?
So for one pond, you could, I think, one full-time equivalent could do for a pond, because but what you see is in a pond you could have up to 3 to 4 pences who are working per pond. For a pond, you have 3 to 4 persons working. So, but they don't all work 8 hours at a stretch in a day. So that's why the full-time equivalent comes in.
Yeah. Well, just give us a small question for those of us who are not familiar with catfish. What is the sort of life cycle? How long between fingerling and table-ready fish?
Okay, so before now, the practice has been that farmers raise fingerling and then rear it for 6 months to table size. But with these best practices and the changes that is being experienced in the market system, farmers now begin to raise juveniles, and it takes about 4 months, 4.5 months to raise it to table size, which is approximately 1 kg of fish.
And is the cost of feed an issue, a challenge?
Okay, so by last year, towards the end of last year, the cost of fish feed was really an issue. So some farmers were finding it difficult to break even and make profits. Now, what has happened in that space is that there's been a lot of competition, because the cost of feed is about 70% cost of production of fish farmers. As a result of that, you see the feed companies have the highest incentive in the fish farming business. So when that happened, if fish farmers start leaving the business, it means that the feed companies are losing money. So there was a strong competition among the feed companies, which led to the influx. New feed companies sprang up, and you also understand the Naira devaluation in Nigeria last year. The Naira, there was a devaluation last year, which resulted in this high cost. So what has happened is a competition among the fish feed companies, who have now, so there was an influx of a new feed who competed strongly with the existing fish feed producers. So that has now resulted in a reduction of the price of feed in Nigeria, also leading to increased production. So we saw feed coming down from 500 Naira per bag to 360 Naira, sorry, that's about $1 per 15 kg bag of feed.
Excellent. Okay. I'm going to pause again and just say, look in the chat box now, because I'm just reposting that link to our webinar survey. And if you've got time to do that now or when the seminar is over, I'd be very grateful. Okay. James, or indeed Faith, have you any other, I'm just trying to think, I'm having a look through the questions here. We've largely covered them. I've found the conversation very engaging. Have you any other thoughts of things that you would like to share with the seminar participants? This is again a personal question, James. I'm quite keen to understand what you think the the longer term potential is here? I mean, do you see this model and the role of aquaculture service providers is spreading out across other parts of the Delta to regions that PIND is not working in? Have you come across it in other parts of Nigeria?
Yes, I think this, if you ask me, this is actually the future. Yeah, because quite a number of models actually emerged as a result of our intervention. Like I said initially, the feed companies tried as much as possible to organize demonstrations on their own, but they are not quite skilled. It's not really their business to do demonstration per se. So with the emergence of aquaculture providers who are seeing opportunities and making a lot of money, by playing this kind of role, we're beginning to see the emergence of new aquaculture service providers. For example, we originally trained about 4 to 5 aquaculture service providers in 3 batches. But today, we have close to 60 aquaculture service providers. Beyond the Niger Delta, they're all over. Some of our, because they're business guys, so they're not limited to any kind of geographic coverage. They go outside of the Niger Delta, wherever there's business opportunity. They go over there to set up fish farms, to advise other fish farmers, and they just make money. They work for, they get contracts from the government, they get contracts from feed companies, and basically to promote feed, and as well as other services to fish farmers.
Mm-hmm. Did you? There's a question here from the YAPASA program participant. You should let us know what your name is, by the way. So you're a bit anonymous at the moment, whoever Mr. YAPASA program is, or Mrs. Can you? What have been have there been any issues in encouraging young people into? Oh, it's Mpulu. Thank you, Mpulu. Have there been any issues about encouraging young people into these models? Are young people naturally more attracted to this as an opportunity, or did you have to design interventions in a particular way to attract them into aquaculture?
Well, this is very interesting because compared to other sectors where we're working, don't forget that PIN Foundation is, working in palm oil, cocoa, cassava, and poultry. But compared to the other sectors, we've seen a lot of young people participating in aquaculture because it's quite new the way it is. 20 years ago, this wasn't really in place. So a lot of young people find it fascinating getting into the sector because it doesn't require acquisition of land. The entry barriers are quite low, so it's easy for them to get into the space. Not only the production function, but other functions of the value chain, including inputs, processing, and the end market. And I've also seen a number of young people who basically are not fish farmers, but they basically buy fish produce from farmers, process it, and sell it to schools, markets, and other organizations. So there's a strong emergence of young people getting into the sector.
Mm-hmm. And how much has the sector grown in the last 10 or 20 years?
We said about 30% over the past 5 to 10 years.
Yes, and if you also look at it in terms of volume of fish being produced in the Niger Delta region and in the country generally, it has actually increased from about, say, 20,000 tons to over 400,000 tons of fish currently being produced in country. So that will show you how the sector has grown over time, over the last 10 years.
Wow. And how does that, I know you said you gave this figure earlier, but I didn't note it down. How does that compare with imports?
Yes, so if you look at the use of inputs, that has also increased drastically. Like I mentioned, the cost of feed, for instance, is 70% of the total cost of.
No, I meant sorry, fish imports of fish.
The importation of fish, yes, that has also reduced the importation, and also considering the ban, the federal government ban in importation of fish. So you could see a lot of fish being grown and produced in country as compared to the rate of importation of fish, in the past years.
And also, the federal government of Nigeria devalued the currency, and that actually made import less attractive and less profitable.
Yeah.
So that's strong increase in the demand for local fish.
Yeah. So has there been any? Obviously we've been talking about these small scale pond production of fish, but given the sort of macroeconomic changes that you just mentioned with the devaluation, has there been any larger commercial production going on? I mean, have any big commercial producers stepped into this space?
Yes, of course, there are a number of large fish producers springing up, across the Niger Delta region. We have farmers who are even producing as high as 400,000 fish per cycle, and that has also resulted in some big hatcheries springing up in the region who are producing within 100 to 300,000 fish seed for farmers, across the region. So there has been, because of the viability of the sector and the profitability, a whole lot of large commercial production is taking place, in country.
And in addition to that, there is a multinational, Olam, that has established a fish farm that can actually produce about 20,000 metric tons per day of fish feed. Vital Feeds, another company, produces about 5,000 metric tons per day. This is in response and the expansion in the market.
And so, in the longer term, do you see this as the large commercial farms and these small ponds as complementary parts of the sort of market system, or is there going to be a competition between the two which squeezes some of the young people out?
The gap is quite huge. Because like I said earlier, it's close to 4 million metric tons. In the past, 50% of that is to be made by import. So at least there is a gap of about 1,500 metric tons.
Okay.
1.5 million metric tons.
Okay. There's still plenty of market space.
Okay. Now, I was also going to add to that we do not see the commercial farmers squeezing out the small farmers out of the system, because that is also part of the best practices that farmers are being taught, so they can effectively and efficiently produce fish to be able to sell at a good and competitive price as well.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Faith and James. It's been a very, very interesting conversation, and I hope those of you listening have enjoyed it. We are coming towards the end of the hour, and I just wanted to give an opportunity to everyone to sort of any quick last questions, and anyone who wants to fill in that survey link as well, that would be very welcome. I want to repeat what I said at the beginning, which is if you're with a program that you think you would like to run a webinar like this and present your own experience, share your knowledge, please do get in touch with us, because the Beam Exchange has that mandate to provide this kind of space. I'm just wondering if could you just show the final slide again in your pack, because I think we've got a so there's the link to our webinar page, and you'll find, so we've been recording this, and we will post the recording on the webinar page in a few days' time. And so if you want to go back and look at this again, or you want to share, if you've been impressed and want to share it with any of your friends or colleagues, please go and send them a link from the webinar page that will appear there shortly. I'm not seeing any last-minute questions from anybody. So I think really what I can do, because you've done a sterling effort here of presenting the work, and you've really made it feel like I feel like I kind of know what it's like now to work in the fish ponds of Warri. It's been very engaging. Thank you, James, and thank you, Faith. I think we'll, as we're getting to the top of the hour, I will wind it up there, and hope to see everyone who's participated in this coming to join us for the next Beam webinar. Any final words from you, James or Faith?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mike, and everyone for listening. We're open to partnerships and sharing knowledge about the sector. You can always email us, or you can reach Mike or Isabel to know a little bit more about the PIM Foundation, about the interventions in aquaculture and in the agricultural sector.
Excellent. Thank you very much, James. Thank you, Faith, again, and thanks to everyone who came along. And I hope you have the rest of the day works out well for you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mike, and thank you everyone that's listening in. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Cheers.